If you do have good data labeling processes, if your customers do love what you're putting out there, if you're beating the big tech companies, et cetera, then investors have a lot of confidence that you are the one to go win this market.
Translation is one way AI is becoming more accessible and common.
It's helping users generate specific types of content based on specific prompts that the user will input.
Hey everyone, and welcome to SlatorPod. Hey Esther,
Hey, Florian.
how are things?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. How are you? Been on holiday?
All good? Yeah, so we have you back checking in for a quick news segment before we have a super interesting guest conversation with Scott Stephenson, CEO of Deepgram, like a really deep tech, machine learning, automatic speech recognition company. I can tell you their origin story is like hands down the coolest origin story we've ever had. So you gotta check this out. I was like, I had my mind blown live on the podcast. Incredible how they got the idea to do that company. So talking today, today we're talking about Google's Translation Hub, Netflix, and like some of the content news we got from their filing, about Zoo, about Jasper, and about jobs. So did you follow that Translation Hub launch at all, Esther, or?
Yeah, I did. It was quite an interesting one to watch.
Right. So it was at their kind of cloud conference. I think it was already like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we're catching up on some news here. But basically, it's Google packaging a lot of the existing components that they have into like a suite of like kind of you can call it, I guess, a TMS, right? That they're offering to the enterprise. So they're packaging in like Google Translation API, like the Google Translate API, like the AutoML translation. So like the somewhat customizable machine translation thing into what they call like a fully managed solution. And I mean, it was a pretty high level launch. So the CEO Sundar Pichai launched it at that conference, and kind of boasting about the 135 target languages they have. And his quote is like, "Translation is one way AI is becoming more accessible and common." So it's very high level, like when they speak about stuff like that. But down to earth, it's like, I mean, this is going to compete with solutions like from Microsoft, from Amazon Translate, maybe even DeepL going forward. But I think it's interesting that Google continues to kind of step by step add to its kind of enterprise-ready translation offering. It is starting to compete with what's out there in the more kind of specialized language industry, language technology world. And I think LSPs and TMS providers need to keep a very close eye on this. There was a super interesting post by, let me just pull that up, David McNamee. He's a language tech specialist at Straker on LinkedIn, where he basically said like, hey, this is something you want to watch out for. Of course, it doesn't cover all of the complexities that we have in the industry, but if you're kind of a naive, not naive. Now, basically, I stopped quoting him. I'm basically giving my own take. I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm using my own kind of take here. I think if you could theoretically build like a pretty sophisticated workflow now, like translation workflow on top of that particular platform, that Translation Hub, if you wanted to as an enterprise buyer. Now, obviously, it's not going to tick all of the boxes, but it ticks a lot more than it did a few weeks ago. So, interesting new competition here coming into the market. And, in a year from now, we can maybe finally answer that question, like, what if Google enters the market with a bit more refined way? Because that's the question we always get.
It's all been quite speculative, hasn't it, before now? Like, big what if?
I mean, it's like literally every time we talk to an investor and they come in and like their first question is, but what if Google enters the market? Well, Google has entered the market. Like in a year from now, we can say, kind of in a somewhat serious way. And, I guess that even in a year from now, the industry is still going to be thriving. Good. From Google to another tech company, Netflix, which has bounced back. Shares are up again, and they're producing a ton of content. So what's going on there?
Yeah, well, we picked out some of the language highlights from their Q3 earnings calls. This was mid-October, again, going back a few weeks. Mostly sort of looking at what some of the best performing non-English content was. So a few examples of like quite big hitters that are non-English original content pieces coming from Netflix. So there was Korea's Extraordinary Attorney Woo, which was the best performing among non-English content and clocked up something like more than 400 million hours of viewing time, which is a lot. But this is the metric that they're... Have you watched it?
No.
I have not either.
I got sucked into that other show that with, oh my God, what was the title? The Watcher.
Yeah.
It's not non-English.
Exactly.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's a good show. But also they are continuing, obviously, to see the big hits from the English content side as well. So there was Stranger Things, the fourth season of Stranger Things, which had something like 1.35 billion hours watched. So that's 3 times the number of hours than the biggest non-English content, the Korean piece. So yeah, lots of hours obviously being watched here generally. But what else were they saying? So the CFO, Spencer Neumann, was talking about big local titles with big local impact and the fact that they have the ability to travel. And he was talking about shows like Sintonia in Brazil, The Empress in Germany, and High Water in Poland, and another one from Korea, Narco Saints. So there you go, potentially some recommendations for things to go and check out on Netflix if you're looking for non-English content. But yeah, I mean, it's more just sort of continuing along with their theme and their vision for bringing that kind of local content to global audiences. And they're talking about, in the case of Extraordinary Attorney Woo, the co-CEO Ted Sarandos was saying, we can take a show that other folks would view as being extraordinarily Korean, he said, and make it work around the world. So I suppose that's what, they're attempting to do. And then in terms of the broader numbers, APAC was the fastest growing market for Netflix in Q3. So they added 1.43 million subscribers there, while on the other end of the spectrum, North America was the slowest region, and they added just 100,000 net subscribers during the quarter. I mean, these are still big numbers, but obviously not quite the growth that they have been seeing.
We should check out what's the dubbing on these shows, like how much was dubbed. Yeah, maybe we should do this for next time, like maybe write a piece on it, like exactly how many languages are available, although it's really location dependent. I was just in the US, and like just Netflix, it doesn't show you all the options that I get in Europe sometimes, so it's not like it's somewhat different there. Well, speaking about media and obviously all the demand that's being created by Netflix and by these other streamers, Zoo Digital is basically near an all-time high in terms of their share price. Really bounced back, like tripled over the past few months, probably this year, almost tripled, weighing in now at a cool 150, almost $170 billion market cap. They're expecting about $100 million million. Yeah, sorry, million. Yeah. Did I say billion?
Yeah.
Thanks.
They're a few orders of magnitude smaller, but still incredibly well done.
Yeah, so 160 million market cap, meaning what they're worth on the stock market, because they're profitable and growing, and the market obviously likes the kind of tailwinds they have from all of the dubbing and subtitling going on with the streamers. We've spoken about it so many times on this podcast, but congrats to Zoo. They also had an investor kind of meeting a couple of weeks ago. You can check it out. There's like a 1 hour long recording on Vimeo, so very interesting for those that want to dive deeper. Now let's stay with the billion theme here, Esther. The billion. It's not 1.5 million that Jasper is valued at, but 1.5 billion. So what is Jasper, and who thinks they're worth 1.5 billion?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Jasper, that's a piece that we wrote recently, is a, broadly speaking, a multilingual AI writer. So AI writer being a kind of category of company that's becoming more and seems to be becoming more and more popular more recently. And we actually wrote sort of a bit more of a deep dive into what is AI writing a couple of months back. So if anyone's interested in sort of learning more, then go and have a look at that. But essentially, it's helping users generate content, so specific types of content based on specific prompts that the user will input. Jasper say that they help users break through the language barrier. So they write creatively and clearly in 25 plus languages is kind of their pitch. But it really, I suppose, is applicable for things like product descriptions, blog posts, a lot of this kind of, I suppose, user generated or kind of social media type content that you would see. So Jasper, yeah, it's a US based company. I think they sprung up in 2021, but apparently had been kind of tweaking, playing around with the model and what they were offering for a while. So they recently announced that they raised 125 million in what is their Series A, and consequently valued at 1.5 billion, as we said. So huge valuation there, with the investors being headed up by Insight Partners, which a name might be familiar to some of our listeners. It's a VC firm that actually also invested in Deepgram back in, well, earlier in 2022. Yeah, and I think the thing that, well, you and I were talking about earlier, Florian, is how, well, this Jasper and obviously other also multilingual, generally AI writers, is based on GPT-3 as the underlying technology. So GPT-3 was released in 2020. And what we're now seeing is more and more startups having, kind of productized and brought or commercialized, I suppose, and built on top of GPT-3. They're, not maturing, but they're sort of a couple of years into their journey. And you're starting to see these companies raising Series A from investors. And yeah, I mean, arguably, this is probably one of the, if not the largest of its kind, being able to achieve that kind of valuation.
Feels a bit peaky. Not sure. I mean, we all understand that this technology is going to change the world. Like, I mean, GPT-3-like things, right? These large language models, which, do check out other podcasts on that. There's a lot of content out there. But it just feels like, I mean, somebody betting that Jasper's going to win the entire category. This is a Series A. This is super early stage. This is not like, Series C or pre-IP or whatever. I mean, this is, where do you go from here? Like a $10 billion valuation, the Series B? So it feels quite a stretch, and like basically betting that Jasper's going to win the entire category here of like kind of B2B writing aids. So yeah, interesting. We also speak to Scott later about this and competing with technologies like Whisper that's out there. So it's interesting, but of course there's so many layers to actually making this ready for end users and for enterprise customers, etc. So let's see if Jasper ends up being a category winner here. A bit closer to home in our language industry, jobs are still plentiful.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, I remember a couple of months ago saying that the job index had declined. I think that was possibly the first time in 2022, apart from the January typical decline, that it had a slight wobble in September 2022, but seems to, over the past couple of months, more than recovered. So it's currently at its highest ever level in November 2022. That's since records began in mid-2018. So far, year to date, the index has climbed 6.5 points. Climbed 6.5 points just in November, which actually is a pretty huge climb, and 15 points to date in 2022, and is up more than 87 points since 2018.
Any particular segment that's doing well, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're starting to see is more kind of buy-side organizations actually driving and fueling some of that growth as opposed to more kind of supply LSP side. So that's, I mean, obviously most of that's kind of anecdotal as well as what we're hearing and observing. But yeah, I mean, obviously, still kind of a challenging environment for anyone and everyone at the moment. Got sort of the challenges of employment rates dropping in the US and Europe, and obviously some turbulence, maybe Zoo Digital aside, but a lot of the listed language companies are having a bit of a rough time in terms of share performance as well so far.
I think it was interest rates, not employment. Employment's actually holding up quite well. Frankly, I mean, even in the European Union, even GDP is better than expected. So I think people are still it's almost like suspended animation. Like they're waiting for the big impact of all of these negative factors hitting. But, at least like in many countries, unemployment is still very, very low. And, we're seeing this obviously reflected in this index. So good news for now.
We like good news.
We'll be talking about this at SlatorCon Remote as well in December, still on early bird, so go and register. Well, thanks, Esther, and let's head over to Scott and talk about what Deepgram's doing. And welcome everyone to SlatorPod. Joining us today is Scott Stephenson, CEO and co-founder of Deepgram. So Deepgram offers multilingual end-to-end automatic speech recognition and real-time transcription. Hi, Scott.
Hey.
So where does this podcast find you today? What country, what city?
I am in West Coast of the United States. I live in the Bay Area.
Bay Area. That's a good place for AI, for a tech company, of course, right? The place on earth. So first, just kind of give us the elevator pitch for Deepgram, so we just get a bit of a better understanding for what the company does.
Deepgram is a speech AI company. We're API based, and so we work with developers who are developing voice applications in real time or based on recordings. And so that could go from phone calls and call centers to podcasts to streaming video platforms to food ordering. It's all over the place. Anybody who's building some kind of voice application that needs automation or understanding inside it, then that's generally where we play. And we support over 30 languages and a real-time, in a very fast, like low latency real-time environment. So you can interact with it. It feels almost, almost human speed. And the throughput is also very high. So if you have like a huge backlog of podcasts or something like that, you don't have to wait around all day for them to transcribe. It's very quick. And the understanding side of Deepgram is also just a very interesting up and coming type of product where most people, when they're thinking of speech transcription or something like it, they're just thinking of words, and that is a really good start. But actually, usually what people are trying to accomplish is to understand what's happening inside the audio. Like what topic are they talking about? How many speakers there are? What's the sentiment? Can I find that one clip that I in particular cared about or that was really funny, where people laughing, that kind of thing, right? So there's a whole new side. It's not just words anymore. It's not just transcription anymore. There's that next level of understanding that is coming out, and those are features that we're releasing.
Wow, exciting to talk about this in a bit. So, but before, I got to ask you this question, putting you on the spot a little bit. What's the kind of single hardest thing to solve for in kind of automatic speech recognition? If there's one or two things you can point out.
Well, do you want a technical side or a market side? Because they're different for each.
Let's do both.
Yeah. So from a technical side, it's probably the labeled data, because as far as I can tell, it's, if not the top, it's one of the top modalities from a cost perspective to actually label a useful piece of data. So for text, you can get that for free on the internet. For audio, you might think you could get that for free on the internet as well, but it's not labeled. And so if you want to have somebody sit down and transcribe it, put all the sentiments in there, figure out what language they're speaking, all this stuff. Like it's really, really expensive per hour. It's generally, like $100 to $500 per hour. And you need like hundreds of thousands of hours in order to train models. And so you're talking like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in order to do it. And so from a technical side, like just getting the labeled data in all of the language that you'd like to cover, and with all the accents that you'd like to cover, with all the use cases that you'd like to cover, that's really the tricky part. A lot of people think like maybe it's the sophisticated model underneath or something like that. And it's like for speech recognition, or speech recognition and other speech understanding, it's really the lack of really good data that is holding it back. It's not ideas on how the model will work. And from a market side, I would say speech is interestingly at a disadvantage compared to like self-driving cars and images and things like that, because we as humans don't think of automatic speech recognition or of sentiment analysis or of automatic language detection or summarization or something. We don't think of them as hard things. Like when somebody talks to you, like we have inbuilt hardware and software that makes it really easy for us to, in a split second, understand what you're talking about, what you mean, where you're going with it, etc. And so we kind of downvalue that. And also you just can't see it. Like you can't see it. It's really like people are entertained by videos, you know what I mean? And so if you show like just a bounding box around somebody's head, and when you move, it follows it, that's like entertaining to your eye, right? But getting the transcription right or getting the sentiment right or something like that, people are like, yeah, that's what it should do, And so it's an interesting balance because it's exciting to see these things that humans, visually are excited by. Like when they see those, they latch on to those. But for the audio side, they're like, yeah, it should be working, And so anyway, from a market penetration perspective, that's been really interesting because you have to cross over like near human abilities to get people excited, essentially. And just these last couple of years, the industry has been able to start doing that, like very, very fast, high quality transcription with great punctuation and everything like that, along with like sentiment analysis, automatic language detection, translation, et cetera. All that stuff is sort of coming together in the last couple of years at near human accuracy. And then that actually is starting to get exciting now. So we're 7 years old as a company. So I would say like the first 5 years were really tough because everybody had these expectations that it should be human level. And at least now that it's coming close, and with adaptation, it can be better than human level. Now the market is sort of turning around and seeing the value. So it's really great to see.
So when you started the company, I mean, like, is that something you were expecting to take 5 years, 6 years to actually break through? Was that one of the kind of, underlying ideas? Or did you expect it to happen, I don't know, in 2017, 2016? And then, I mean, maybe on a personal level, you were a physicist, I think. How did you transition into this field? Why this field in particular?
I came from an academic background, and the short story on an academic background is if there's a new way to do something and it clearly is better and obviously works, within 6 months, at least 2 years, everybody's going to be doing that. And so once we saw that end-to-end deep learning is possible using a data-driven approach and hardware accelerating it, like what you could put all of these things together in the next like year or two when we started the company, we thought the entire world is going to switch over instantly to that. This is like the simplistic scientist academic mindset, right? That there's going to clearly be a better solution, and then everybody will just switch to it. But that is not how business works, basically, right? And things are not identified that way. That's not how they propagate through. You have to have social proof. You have to, get your marketing right. You have to get your lighthouse customers. Also, a lot of these companies are at the top of their food chain or close, and the only thing they fear in life is their competitor. So what you have to do is like go get their competitor to use you, and then make a better product than them, and then finally the big one will, switch over and that kind of thing. So all of those dynamics, we didn't even really think about that. So when we first came into the company, we thought, okay, well, we'll just come out with a superior technical, technique, right? And then everybody will just want to use it. And that is just not how it works. So that was one really big challenge in the beginning. So we had to figure out, how to distribute, how to go to market, how to do sales, how to do marketing, how to package the product appropriately, all of that stuff. And it's not just about the deep tech. But yeah, you asked about my background and the founding team's background. So we were particle physicists. We built deep underground dark matter detectors. I was 2 miles underground in a government controlled region of China, where they were building the world's tallest dam, like literally right next to us. Like it was part of that entire operation. I was the only American there, and there were 20,000 estimated. It's hard to tell because people wouldn't give me real numbers, but something like 20 to 30,000 people that were working on the dam. But we were just this little side project for the dam, where they allowed like 15 or so, 20 or so scientists to come in and build an experiment 2 miles underground in this tunnel that they just happened to like put there. They were putting it there to build this dam and also to redivert a river through a mountain, so, which is pretty cool. But nevertheless, it's like this James Bond layer underground, with these huge cavernous areas for hydroelectric generators and everything. And like that's where we were building our experiment. And what we were doing was building this dark matter detector, which, for to this day is that location is still, and that detector that we built on the inside is the quietest place in the universe. It's this very shielded detector that has extremely low radiation on the inside. And the idea is that you want nothing to happen on the inside that you know about. And if anything happens, then it must be something that you don't know about, which is dark matter, essentially. And so that's the general logic behind it. And that experiment has to be extremely sensitive, and it has to work with these waveforms that look a lot like audio waveforms, and there's hundreds of them at a time. So it's kind of like you're doing like real time recording of like 500 different conversations or something, and so you can kind of see the parallel here. We had to do machine learning in bulk in real time on these waveforms that look a lot like audio waveforms, and then figure out what is happening inside the detector in real time and make decisions about it and that kind of thing. And that kind of thinking and technology is what led to Deepgram, where we actually just thought it was really cool what we got to do. Like, who gets to do this? Working this James Bond layer underground. It's crazy, right? So we made these little devices to record audio all day, every day, just, like a Raspberry Pi type thing and whatnot. And just hook a battery up to them, strap them to your body, just record audio. And we ended up with over 1,000 hours of audio. And we wanted a way to find interesting moments inside, because if you just recorded 24 hours of your life, most of it's boring. You do not want to listen to it again. There's only a few interesting moments. And so we were looking for some way to find that, but we were looking toward the outside. We thought somebody was already building this product. And so we went out looking for something to help us do that. And we couldn't find it. We looked at, Nuance and IBM Watson and all the ones that were released at the time. But we also went to like Google and Microsoft and talked with speech experts there. And we asked them, hey, are you guys going to be doing end-to-end deep learning to understand what's inside audio? And they're like, deep learning, end-to-end deep learning, especially for languages, et cetera, that is never going to work. Languages are way too hard, et cetera. And we're just like, but that's a reason that you need end-to-end deep learning. Like, I don't get your logic. So anyway, we couldn't start the company fast enough then. It's like these people, nobody gets it, so let's start the company. And then that was 7 years ago. So if you think about things like OpenAI Whisper, which is an end-to-end deep learning model that just came out, that's what we were doing 7 years ago, And so anyway, like OpenAI coming out with these types of things is a very big validation of like what we've been working on for a long time.
That is hands down the coolest company origin story we've ever had on the podcast. Dark matter detection, giving you the idea for your company.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's such a crazy setting.
100%. Yeah, and it's in China. I lived in China as well, so I don't know. I can only imagine the complexities of actually doing what you did there. Okay, it feels kind of mundane, but I got to ask about kind of your key target markets, industry segments for Deepgram, and like how you You mentioned also before kind of finding particular clients in sectors, right? So SME, enterprise, startups, and then like I think now you're really partnering with other AI companies, right? I noticed on your website you have some kind of some of your customer success stories would be with other AI companies that are using Deepgram, kind of like I think it's Illyrian AI, Vicinity, Nitro AI. So like, just tell us these different customer segments and how these kind of next gen companies are now using you as well.
Yeah, there's three areas that we think about here. It's voice AI companies, and one really easy way to bracket these is just go by age of company. So if they're 0 days to like 7 years old or so, then they're probably a voice AI company of some type. If they're interested in using Deepgram, so maybe they're doing food ordering, maybe they're doing sales coaching, maybe they're doing like a podcast search engine, maybe they're doing all they could be doing lots of different things. So generally young, fast moving, companies with their entire product is based on some kind of voice AI. Um, but a lot of them start out in the same place where they're thinking, oh, I need a transcription or I need to understand what's inside the audio before I can make some kind of decision and move on. So they might, many of them will start out thinking, okay, well, where's the open source software to help me do that? Or, let me go get a free access to Google or AWS or something like that, right? And try to get moving. But what they'll quickly realize is if you go the open source route, everything's going to be really expensive. It's going to be super time consuming. You're going to have like have your entire team like working on just trying to get a single language of transcription working. Or if they go to like AWS or Google or something like that, they'll have that brand recognition on that side and they'll have very high hopes. But once they start using it, they'll be like, wow, it doesn't recognize these words. It's really expensive, et cetera. Can I get this to adapt to my audio to learn like these keywords that I care about, like this menu item in my when in this ordering flow that I have or whatever? And the answer to that is like roughly no. Like it can't. Their systems don't adapt. It's certainly not automatically to what you're doing. And then if they start to scale up, they'll start to say, wow, this is really expensive, $1.50 an hour, $2 an hour, et cetera. That's crazy. And so anyway, it's that kind of company, that voice AI company is sort of playing in that area. And what if they start to hit on a good product, then and it starts to scale, and they start to get sick of managing all of that like transcription infrastructure from the like open source side or whatever themselves, then they start to look for a partner that just does all of that for them. And I call this AI compute companies. So like we are an AI compute company, that doesn't mean that they don't do AI. They still do. They do it on top of what we're doing, So it's very similar to like a tech company using standard cloud compute. You're still a tech company if you use cloud compute, under the hood. You're just building your stuff on top of it, right? And so anyway, similar kind of thing for these younger AI companies. And then there's a middle type of company, which is a connectivity company. So you think about like maybe 10 to 25 years old, going all the way back to essentially when like a voice over IP was invented, around that time period. And you can think about, all the meetings companies and all the like phone connectivity companies like Twilio and things like that. Then those companies have a different thing in mind. Their entire business is not built on voice AI, but they see it as a way to extend their market, to have a new line of business and to grow massively and to overtake their competitors. So they need a partner that can supply a platform that they can build on top of. And so we're a really good choice for that. And then there's another category, which is enterprises. And these are, companies 25 plus years old, they're banks, they're, Comcast, they're, that kind of thing. And we all know like the terrible customer experience when you're trying to call into those companies. And what they're doing is trying to remove that human bottleneck right now from you getting really good service and instead have AI automation help that. And that's a really, really big part of this market. It's the slowest moving part of this market, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the experience is going to be amazing because they're putting the work in now to do this automation. So it's those three areas: voice AI, connectivity companies, and enterprises.
And for the enterprise, especially kind of for the more conservative ones, maybe like banks or something, are you still offering, or are you offering on-prem? And is that like a particular challenge?
Absolutely. Yes. You need to do on-prem to get this right. And this is partially why I don't call it like Deepgram an AI cloud company. We're an AI compute company. So we support the cloud. Yes. You can do hybrid, you can do on-prem, you could do air gaps, et cetera. So I think that's very, very important for AI because these companies hold their data very close to their chest. And sometimes the cloud is what they need, and sometimes on-prem is what they need, and it depends on the customer. And so you have to be flexible. So yeah, we support both.
You mentioned Whisper before. That kind of was all over Twitter over the past, I don't know, 4 weeks. And you actually posted about it on LinkedIn. And it was a fantastic kind of summary of what you guys have done so far and how you're now also supporting Whisper. Like, what are some of the key differences, limitations of Whisper versus what you guys are doing? Just kind of, yeah, in a nutshell, your LinkedIn post.
So the general idea is that Whisper is a huge, from an open source model perspective, it is a huge leap forward for open source models. So previous open source models did not have very good capitalization, punctuation, spacing, any of that stuff. And even just the word error rate and accuracy wasn't that great in previous ones. So I'm thinking of like Wave to Vec and Caldi and that kind of thing. Um, but then Whisper came along, where OpenAI trained on a lot of data, a lot of public data that they found, and then they used a modern, encoder decoder style model, and they included capitalization and punctuation and that kind of thing in it. And then they supported, I would call it around 10 languages. They actually say it's over 100, but like once you get past the 10 mark, then like the accuracy is really poor. But nevertheless, like that's a that's a big change compared to previous iterations of open source, where they really only supported one language well. They did not support capitalization and punctuation at all, et cetera. And so when that got released into the world, then of course it's OpenAI as well. And OpenAI is amazing at marketing. They started out, amazing at marketing. And so everybody listens, when OpenAI puts something out into the world. And also, this is the first model that OpenAI has come out and just open source straight away since like GPT. And so it's a really big deal because of that as well. Right. And so anyway, but the performance of the model is good. Like if you just, pip install and grab it and try to use it, you're like, wow, this is a step function change. But you asked about some of the downsides. It's really slow. It's really expensive to run. So it does support some languages. That's true. But if you try to go into the longer tail, then they're really bad. Nevertheless, they'll get better on that. There are a few things that you would think it would support, just like every other transcription engine out there in the world, like knowing the timing of when words came out and that kind of thing, but it doesn't support it because of the way it's built and that kind of thing. But there's also some kind of pathologies where it'll kind of repeat itself, and you're like, wait a minute, none of this was said, et cetera. But for the most part, those are those are pretty to get going, like to make a demo, to get started, to get going, to feel confident about, wait a minute, like speech has gone to the next level, and I'm going to start my project now as like a side project or whatever it is to like get going on that. Whisper is great for that now. And so what we expect is lots more people to latch on to Whisper, to start building things, et cetera. But eventually they'll start to realize the limitations. Like, wait a minute, this language that I need isn't supported that well. Word timings, I really need those. It doesn't support real time at all, so you can't do you couldn't make like a phone ordering app for food or something like that with it. That kind of thing. But nevertheless, like it captures the imagination now for people to say like, wait a minute, we have gotten to a new level. And so I expect all speech recognition companies to up their game now and learn something from it as well. So like there are some things in Whisper that other companies out there were not doing, and there are things to learn from there. So yeah. So I mentioned earlier that Deepgram has been doing end-to-end deep learning for a long time, but we still learn things from the way that Whisper was built, and we'll take the really good parts and we'll use those. And also you mentioned that we just support Whisper as a model now. So if you're used to Whisper, if you like the outputs, et cetera, you can come to Deepgram and use Whisper. And yeah, so I think it's a very, very good thing for the market. It makes it kind of is a milestone for, hey, speech is really, really good and it's in your face now, and like you can start building. And eventually when people get to scale with their products, like we think they'll tend to end up on Deepgram because we support that kind of thing. And so it's very good for us. It's just very good for the industry.
Yeah, so I've never seen as much kind of chatter on Twitter, or excitement on Twitter about ASR ever, right? So in a sense, it creates a ton of awareness, and as you said, as these people start building, they need a more sophisticated solution. That's probably when they would switch, and so it kind of creates awareness. How did, I mean, just back to them, like how do they or maintain it in a sense? I mean, they go out, they get all that data from the internet. Like, do they maintain it, upgrade it, or it's kind of now here and well, it's open source, here you go?
I think that, yeah, I mean, once you let the cat out of the bag, it's out of the bag. But that's at a specific point in time. 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, that model's going to be obsolete, right? But so the way that I would think about it is, what did they do with GPT? So they released GPT first, open source, and let it out there into the world. But then they came around with GPT-2 and said, this is too good. It's too scary for the world. We're not going to release it. They did the same thing with GPT-3, and they said, well, we're going to put up a paywall and then people can use it. And we're going to be the monitor to see if you're using it appropriately and all of that. I expect that to happen with Whisper as well. So you'll have this first version out there, but then there will be a better version released by them later. And there will also be better versions released by other companies as well too. And so anyway, there's going to be this rapid progress, and for them, they're going to probably. Obviously, I don't know exactly what their business plan is, but it makes sense for them to take that same GPT playbook and play that. But all the other companies are now they could use Whisper if they wanted, right? They could go learn from it. They could make models that are similar to it, etc. So yeah, they're entering into the world. We'll see if they want to compete like at massive scale across all these different languages with real time and with all these things, or if they just kind of want to have a model out there that collects data and gets people using it, and kind of slowly over time it evolves. So I'm not exactly sure where they'll go with it, but the next years will show us.
How do you guys at Deepgram think about translation? How does it work in your system? Do you kind of get it from somebody else, or do you build it yourself? Obviously for our audience, this is super important, like the translation component.
Yeah, and also for audio, there's kind of two parts, or two ways to do this, which is you could transcribe into the language that is being spoken, and then you can do translation after that. And if you do that, then you kind of stack errors on top of errors. If you have transcription errors and then you have translation errors on top of it, you can imagine how that may be more problematic than if you just made a model that went straight from audio to the other language. And this is one really great thing about Whisper as well that they put out. They put out, like, their models have this capability as well. And this is another reason that the excitement is so high for Whisper, that these models, have been able to take in a certain language, and then without doing an intermediate text representation, they'll do translation to this other language and do a pretty good job at it too. And so I expect both of those modalities, those types of models, to become commonplace in the world and become real time-ish. Like, translation is hard to do in real time, just because some languages are structured so that they're the end of the sentence can totally change the beginning of the sentence in another language and that kind of thing. So like, there's always going to be some inherent delay, like, built in because of that. But nevertheless, real time ish is coming, and so the universal translator is coming, and it's all being kicked off right around now, because text translation is getting pretty good. But now these multimodal models, like doing speech to text, or speech straight to text but in another language, etc., they're becoming feasible. And like I mentioned earlier, this is not necessarily because the models are getting more sophisticated. It's because more good enough data is being uncovered and sort of captured and characterized and whatnot. Then you can put these models together and train them. Yeah, and that's tougher in audio because it's more expensive and more sparse, essentially. But it's all happening, and it's going to continue to happen.
Talking about sparse data, low resource languages, right? I mean, it's a difference if it's German, English, Spanish, English, etc., or if it's a language that has a lot less data. How do you guys manage this? Do you curate some of the data yourself? Do you actually produce it or procure it? How does it happen?
Yeah, it's a complicated thing, but there's generally some levels. So if you can buy data or get data for free, open source, public, etc., then you take that data. Like you may not use all of it, okay, because you might score it as like not high quality enough or something like that. But you take what you can get on that side. But that is not enough to make really good models. It's enough to get you a really good demo, though. Okay, so that can get a product out into the world. That can get some innovators using it. But you need to start capturing data from real use cases and then labeling that data as well in a very high quality way. But you could look at this like, hey, do you need 1,000, 10,000, 50,000, whatever it is, hours of audio transcribed in order to release a new language? It kind of depends on the language. So if you're talking about releasing Canadian versus French Canadian, you don't need 50,000 hours of French Canadian when you already have 50,000 hours of French. And the idea here is that you can make foundation models that know a lot of different languages that have been trained on hundreds of thousands of hours worth of data. This is a very Whisper similar like mindset where you expose the model to a lot of different things, but then you point that model to a new language afterward, or the same language, but you allow it one of the same languages that it was already training on, but you allow it to focus on that language and get really good at that language. But the idea is that you can learn from all of these different languages and to sort of form a model of the world. The model is doing that, and then you allow it to focus and specialize essentially, and then it gets really good in that area. And so some people will call this fine tuning or transfer learning or adaptation or whatever it is. Whatever you want to call it, but you start out with this model that is like this mother model that you kind of clone its DNA, but then you evolve it by having it listen to new data. But it doesn't have to be tens of thousands of hours of it. It could be tens of hours of it, or hundreds of hours, or something. And this is partially why you see the explosion into all these other languages, because you don't need massive piles of data. You just need a good enough representation, and then you start from a good base, and then you transfer learn into that new area. So that's, we're going to see a lot of that explosion over the next couple of years because of that new technique.
There's some hope for my native language, Swiss German, which is really not codified and doesn't have too much data. So let's see.
Yeah, that will probably fall in the next year or two, because of these techniques. Yeah.
Let's just briefly touch on fundraising. I mean, you guys raised a Series B in 2021. Probably anything .ai right now is one of the areas that's holding up extremely well in terms of fundraising, right? I mean, as opposed to maybe like other kind of B2B SaaS, other kind of things there. Like, what are you thinking about in that regard? Is there a bit of a land grab maybe happening at the moment? Does one have to be very aggressive or still very disciplined and build?
Yeah, I think you got to kind of ride the middle there a little bit, because with AI companies, you could spend a lot of money really quickly and find yourself in a bad spot. So I think to make a successful AI company that has everything, that has like a differentiated product, that has a good AI flywheel, that has frontier research going on, that has good sales and marketing and distribution, that has great customer success and service to like keep all of your customers happy and everything. It is really tough to do all of that, because the data labeling side, the frontier research side, that is a cost that like SaaS companies don't have to have essentially, but investors still expect you to have SaaS metrics as an AI company. So you have to be like even better than top SaaS companies to be a top AI company, because you just have to spend more in order to get a performant product. But what that means though is that if you are in that category, if you do have good data labeling processes, if your customers do love what you're putting out there, if you're beating the big tech companies, et cetera, then investors have a lot of confidence that you are the one to go win this market. And so yeah, so if you're in that category, if you're doing a new thing, you're doing it well, your customers love it, and you're in automation and AI, then of course investors are excited right now, because all these companies are looking around in this financial situation right now, this downturn of 2022, where people are looking to cut costs, but still do more. And how do you do that? You do that with AI and automation and that kind of thing. So AI companies are doing well as long as they have a like product that actually works and helps companies achieve what they're trying to do. So yeah, it's a I wouldn't say it's like an extraordinarily favorable funding environment right now for AI companies, but compared to the average company, then investors are listening because there's an opportunity right now for that land grab, for that market grab, for real growth, even in a time where the big tech companies are going down.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's probably the first time that some of the big tech companies are not hiring super aggressively, right? So might be an opportunity on the hiring side as well.
That is a big thing. Hiring is easier now for just startups in general. But yeah, if you're a growing startup, hiring is easier now.
One of the few positive things. So what's most exciting to you on the product roadmap that you can disclose? I know there's not, there's some sensitivities around that, but anything you can disclose, anything you're excited about in the next 12, 18 months?
I mentioned the translation and real time translation. I think that's going to be an absolute game changer. That it's not only so I talked about how audio is hard to it's hard for people to visualize and it's hard for people to get into and that kind of thing. But if you have real-time universal translation, that is no longer the case. Essentially, people can they have fun with that. They want to see themselves speaking another language. They want to hear like what that would sound like. They want to hear their voice cloned, etc. So this next year and a half with text to speech, voice cloning, and real-time translation that will be coming out. That one is very exciting to me. There, so that one's on the excitement side, but there's also just this building a base of this massively scalable, reliable, good SLA, like driving the prices down. We love to drive prices down at Deepgram because I personally think they're too high. I think that if you drop the prices 10x, then you increase the market size 100x. And so like that's kind of the boring thing that Deepgram is doing right now is driving prices down, expanding to new languages, making everything super reliable, etc. But then there's a new excitement frontier as well, which gets people into the mood to build new applications. So that's like this, voice cloning, text to speech side, translation, real time translation, sentiment analysis, and that type of thing. So yeah, over the next year and a half, both of those things are going to be happening. One of them is more exciting than the other, though. Depends on who you are, though.
Yeah, I mean, the translation bit is obviously super interesting for anybody listening to this podcast, right? So they'll be testing it out, and I guess the tolerance there from people is very low. Like if we've played around with this kind of live translation plugins, whatever, on like all these tools for a long time now, and like it breaks down quite quickly, and then you're like, well, this doesn't work, so I mean, I'm not going to use it, right? So if anybody comes out with something that doesn't disrupt the flow instantly, then it's going to get really exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's the precipice that we're on right now. Is we're getting to the point from a data scale, from a technique scale, from a model, type. Like we're getting to the point where that is going. We're going to get to the point where you're not annoyed by it, basically, very quickly. Where you'll be like, this is certainly helpful to some people. I can get value from this. And then a year or two after that, you'll be like, this is indispensable.
Great. Well, we'll be watching. So, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to talk about AI and go in deep. I love the translation angle here too, as well, because it's such a fun next stage in this understanding stage. And I look forward to the next few years as well. And maybe we'll have a new conversation update, in a couple of years and talk about what happened over the last couple.
Absolutely. On episode, I don't know, 220 or something like that.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.